Welcome to Cybersecurity Today, the weekend edition. I'm your host, Jim Love. This show isn't strictly about cybersecurity, but it's a topic that has or should have a real interest for cybersecurity professionals or those who are just interested in cybersecurity. This is the second in a series of episodes that we've done trying to help companies understand where we are with AI at this time and how they can practically use it in their business. I'll jump to the end where this intersects with cybersecurity. From our discussions, our ultimate conclusion is that companies need to get started with practical hands-on programs. But, as you'll also hear at the end of this has to be done securely. We want people to feel free to try things, to experiment. We just don't want that to jeopardize the security of your data or your systems. And if your business users haven't done this already, they will soon. Hopefully this episode will give some thoughts about how to prepare for that. This is the second part of our discussion that we called Project Synapse, AI in Action, a continuing discussion that the three of us have had. Who's the three of us? Well, there's Marcel Gagné. He's a Linux and open source guru. He's an author, thought leader. If you've hung around the Linux world at all, you've probably heard of him. You may have seen him speak. You might have read his books. You might have read his Cooking with Linux column that went on for more than 10 years with Linux Magazine. Second, there's John Pinard, who you might not know, but he's a long-term IT veteran. He works with a financial institution. He's also a cybersecurity pro. Great guy and really knowledgeable. And me. As I noted in our last episode, we've been meeting for this virtual coffee for a number of weeks to discuss what's happening in AI, to share our knowledge, and to keep up to date. We record these sessions, and yes, we use AI to do the summaries. We got the idea of sharing parts of these discussions with a wider audience. We hope you enjoy listening to it. And now, here's episode 2 of Project Synapse, AI in Action. Here, John Pinard, and then Marcel, and you probably know my voice by now. We want to talk about where we are today. 2 weeks ago, we talked about how we'd gotten here. Now the question is, what's here? Right? And it's really easy if you're a YouTuber, because you can just go, wow, this by being hyper intelligent to you, and you can make stuff up. But if you're actually talking to somebody in business who really wants to understand, excuse me, sir, what can I do with this? How do you describe where you are right now? That's the big question.
I think for me, if somebody asked me that, I would say that we're in the very early stages. That we've had a lot of interest in the use of AI, but we also have to look at security. What is the use case? How do we make sure that the data that we want to use within AI is going to be safe and secure? And how are we going to make sure that the results we get out of AI are A, accurate, and B, we can verify it? We have a lot of people, as I said, at the office that are going, oh, we want to use AI. And you ask them, what do you want to use it for? I don't know. What can we use it for? And so we spend a lot of time trying to push people to develop use cases. Yeah. And we're trying to help them to build those use cases. But you need that before you can actually put anything in place.
The fear of missing out.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And of course, when your customers and everybody else is asking you, do you have a strategy for this? And you go, I don't know. And you have no idea what you're going to do with it. You use the words, it's early days. And I think that's something that we still struggle with. When we were talking about this last time, we talked about the idea that it hasn't been 2 years yet. It's not 2 years until the end of November. So yeah, it is very much early days and things are happening so quickly. I think, I'm just going to piggyback on top of your security thing for a split second here. If you were to release almost any kind of world-changing technology in the past on people and drop it on hundreds of millions of people, basically overnight, this would have been considered practically a crime at one time. And now we've just had it done to us. We're in the middle of this incredible experiment of which we're all participants. And I think that we are all really still trying to figure out what to do with it. I do all sorts of things with it. I play with it constantly. But that doesn't mean that I have a solid idea of where it is that I'm trying to go with this stuff. And I'm not sure that anybody does, especially when it changes overnight.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. You have to know where you are before you can answer the question, what can you do? The problem we have is the technology is moving faster than we can even absorb it by any stretch. So that's problem one. Problem two is, how do I conceive of it? How do I explain it? With everything happening, there's video, audio, there's text, there's chat GPT, there's all of these various points all over the place, an explosion of different software, and there's all these things. That's what I think people, when they're trying to figure out how do I use it, they're just getting overwhelmed by all the stuff that's happening.
And if you're trying to build something on the technology, it's particularly frustrating. There have been countless startups that have appeared in the last 2 years trying to figure out how they're going to incorporate this, build a product on top of this thing, only to find out that 6, 8 months later, the frontier technologies have advanced to the point that what they built is no longer useful, is no longer, viable as a product. And I think that aspect of it is particularly difficult. If you're a business, if you're a small entrepreneur or something like that, I mean, there are different types of people. There are the ones who are willing to put a lot of money on the line for bets. And if you lose big, you lose again and you lose again. And eventually you hit the goal, you hit the big vein of gold and all of a sudden you're rich in theory, or at least that's the theory. But the problem is that when what you're working on, and I've done the same thing, I was working on a news verification system, and the news verification system was basically destroyed with Perplexity popping onto the scene. Tons of companies have been through this. I think the only safe thing for most businesses at the moment is to try to find out how they can use what's out there as opposed to try to build something. It's more a question of how can I use this tool in what I'm already doing?
This really hasn't changed, though, when you think it through. Big companies stopped innovating 40 years ago or 20 years ago. I don't, maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe let's say 10 or 15 years ago. Big companies stopped innovating, except for some stuff happening at Google. That Friday thing really did work. But companies, Microsoft, all of these companies, they wait till some little company comes up and goes, oh, that's cool, I'll buy them.
Then they buy it.
And so we outsourced innovation a long time ago from these companies. But now you can't, you start something up and you find out, oh, Sam Altman built that into the GPT. There is no buy. People paid an extraordinary amount of money for a few people. When they bought DeepMind, when Google bought DeepMind and things like that, they paid a lot to bring in what is essentially a very few people with some good knowledge and a few things that they had there. So the days of overpaying may be over, which makes it doubly difficult for these entrepreneurs because you've got to actually get beyond a business plan. You got to develop something. You have to develop customers. And then you find out literally that OpenAI's got that facility now. Don't discount Claude and Anthropics because they're going like mad as well.
Yeah.
So if you're building a great coding engine, you better have something really good. I was working with it, just doing some writing, and you can go onto YouTube. You can find all kinds of writing applications that'll help you. Why would I bother? I can, Claude will do it. The O1 version of ChatGPT right now is perfect to help you write anything you want to write. You want to write marketing copy? You want to write your bio. Remember, you have to sit there and type your bio out and all those lies and all that stuff. Ask it to do a bio on me. It's very complimentary. But getting back to the point is that there's a lot of revolutions happening right now. One of them may very well be this. You're not going to be able to start up your little business and sell it unless you look further ahead. And I think there's a lesson in this for business because Altman said this himself. He said, stop trying to design something that has a flaw in OpenAI or ChatGPT that we have today. Stop doing that. He said, think about where we're going to be in 2 years and what you're going to have as a company. And I think that's the failure of business, big and small right now, is that we're not past the point where we can even start to think about where we're going to be in 2 years. And that's a problem.
I admire anybody who actually starts a business because quite frankly, the statistics are terrible. The vast majority of businesses fail. That's just the way it is. And sometimes, of course, it takes them a couple of years to fail, or it takes them 5 years to fail or something like that, which you could consider a 5-year success, depending on how much money you get to walk away with. You have to be willing to take the type of chance that it's just not going to work out. When you're living in a world of diminishing returns in the sense that I invest in this thing and I get a whole heck of a lot back, as opposed to I get a lot of little things back that help me in a variety of other ways. I think that becomes increasingly difficult, even when you've got advice like you should be looking 2 years down the road, because the 2 years down the road is practically impossible for anybody to imagine. Let's think for a second about AGI. Everybody likes to talk about AGI. AGI is going to be this wonderful thing that can do just about anything that any human being can do. If you've got a tool that can do pretty much anything that anybody can do, it can be your accountant, it can be your financial analyst, it can be your marketing department, it can be the person who answers the telephone and talks to customers, it can be your tech support, all of those things. If that's the way that, we actually have a product that can do all those things 2 years down the road, how in hell do you prepare for this? How can you look 2 years down the road and go, so what I have to do is I have to plan for a world where all my people don't work for me. And basically I have an army of artificial intelligence agents that are working for me.
Tying the tools into your systems. Right now, I think that the best way to engage or to bring AI into the business is to use the tools as they are, to figure out what works, what doesn't. And because what you're using today is going to be different tomorrow. These things are changing so fast that being able to plan for what things are going to look like 2 years from now, you can't. And if you spend a bunch of money to integrate an existing AI tool, you're going to spend it again, most likely down the road, because things are going to change dramatically.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. But this is the analogy I drew as I was thinking about making my coffee, thinking I was going to talk to you guys. I said, here's the problem that we have. There's two stances you can take in this. You can be a sports commentator and watch what's happening on the field, and you can have all kinds of great things you're going to say about it, great lines and all those sorts of things. That's one aspect. Or you can get down and play.
Yep.
And I will guarantee you, the guy who's playing is going to learn more about the game. So I think you have to get in and get using these things. But I still think you have to have a strategy with where you want to be. But it's not about the tools, Marcel. It's about what is going to be important to people. You got to think harder than we've ever thought about what's going to happen to your customers. Most businesses have been thinking internal efficiency. They lie. We're doing great things for our customer. Crap. The next slide they're going to say is our employees are our greatest asset. Can you lay some of them off? We made more money last quarter, right? Nobody believes this stuff anymore. As a matter of fact, when I'm doing stories and I do something on a layoff or something like that, I get the company paragraph, I want to gag myself with a spoon. I'm so tired of reading that. Same, we're looking at a long-term strategy where we're going to invest in our employees and blah, 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 blah. I want to start typing blah, blah, blah. Anyway, back to the reality of it though, is that you've got to have a strategy that focuses on what you're going to do that's going to add value in a world. Now you can imagine it. If you keep your focus on what are you going to do that's going to add value and going to do something that people will want to buy, that's a better strategy.
They need to build a business strategy that utilizes AI, not build an AI strategy.
You remember, Jim, you were talking about the adoption of things. We've all bought a house, right? The three of us?
Yeah.
Everybody's bought a house. Okay. There was an observation a number of years ago, and I remember thinking about this. People will spend like a month researching $1,000 laptop computer or something like that. They'll read all the reviews, what to do with it. They'll get on boards. They'll talk to people. They'll go to the store. They'll visit like 5 or 6 different locations looking at this stuff. And then they'll visit a house, walk through it for 20 minutes, and then plunk down $700,000 or whatever the heck it was at the time. This insane, extremely expensive purchase was something that you would do basically like that.
Yep.
Whereas this piddling sum is something that you would waste an incredible amount of time. So I think that while you're trying to figure out whether it's the strategy or how you use this stuff in your business, or for that matter, what it is that you think you want to do with your business, I think that you need to understand that all of this stuff is cheap right now. And it's hard to wrap your head around this idea. Jim, you mentioned Google had the Friday thing. It's 1 day a week you get to work on whatever the heck idea it is that you want to work on. And that was like an awesome idea. And in fact, like companies should be doing that. There should be like a chunk of time where employees are allowed to work on some pet project. And hopefully it has something to do with what your company is doing, but some pet project, some idea that you're working on. And then maybe you integrate that into the business. And then we rapidly make our way to the Star Trek future. However you want to take a look at that. But you have to accept that all of this is cheap. that you can play with this. It's not a big purchase to try to figure out how this can work for you.
Let me take this a step further to just bounce out of that. And this has been done. At least I think Manulife has a policy on this in Canada. There are other companies who do this. Maybe not even invent something. Give them some time to retrain, to get new skills. Make that
Yes.
company time for them to be able to do these things using AI, for instance. And if you did that, you wouldn't have to lay so many people off and then rehire a pile of different skills. You could
Exactly.
take the people who knew your company and retrain them. And this makes me crazy because it's economically inefficient. If you hire people and you look at the curve before they really start to give any value, you're talking 6 months, really.
Yes.
By the end of the third month, they know where the wash was. But realistically, they're not getting anything majorly. Some firms maybe will do it more quickly, but on average, you're talking 3 to 6 months. How many of
Yes,
those
for sure.
people do you hire and you get to the end of the 6 months, you go, you wish you hadn't, right? Or how many of them leave or just never really pan out so that they're just, and so you get somebody who's at least reliable, works with your company, knows your company, God forbid we should have a culture, has absorbed the culture, and you could retrain them. And I think it's a model we failed to use. I think Google had something there. They probably have canceled it now so they can make their share price go up. But I don't think they did totally, because Notebook LLM, the thing that's going to save their reputation in AI in the short run, was an experimental project. No.
Tech support. Jim, I want to go back. We were talking about tech support before the cameras and the microphones started rolling here. And in tech support, one of the things that drove me crazy when I was working in this a gazillion years ago, I started out on a support desk at Honeywell. And we had some people who were absolutely fantastic on the support desk. I just want to say that. But the problem, of course, is that there are pay grades that are built around certain job titles, for instance. So we had pay grades built around certain titles and so on. But then you've got people that are really good at a specific job. But unfortunately, the way that your corporate structure is built up, the way that the environment is built up, you can't actually pay them more. You can't pay them past a certain point, because then you have to bring them into management, or you have to build them into middle manager, a director, AVP, whatever the structure, the steps that you have to take. Whereas what you should really be doing is going, that person is an awesome freaking tech support person. I'm going to pay them at the level that I pay one of my directors, because I want that person continuing to do the job that they are awesome at. And the idea behind perpetually training people in a business, I think, is something we overlook. In the age of AI, when we're sitting there going, I wonder if I can replace these people, maybe what you should do is you should let these people play with different job categories. One of you hopefully knows this. Wasn't that one of the things with the early Edison thing, where everybody had to do a different job in the company at different times? And we're talking like early days of the Edison companies here.
I don't know if it was Edison, but Coke used to do that, and that was Coca-Cola used to do that. I met this guy Bernie, who's a manager for Coca-Cola, and once a month they had to go ride on the truck and restock the shelves in the stores. And I thought, that's what you need.
I worked for Coke for a few years in IT, and they actually sent us out to drive around in the trucks so that we had a better understanding of the business, because it helps you to be better at delivering IT. If you know what you're delivering for, what are you trying to help?
When I still am a consultant, but I'm writing my own obituary. When I started consulting on my own, and one of the first things I did was to say, I want a tour of your premises. I don't want it by management, and I don't want the guy who does the tour. I want you to get me somebody from the line, from what you do. And I remember the guys at Inco thought that they're gonna put one over me. They took me through the mines in Indonesia in the back of an old Toyota truck with no springs, sitting on the cardboard with all the miners and stuff like that. And I laughed at the end of it. I hurt like mad at the end of it, but I laughed at the end of it because I knew so much about that place that I would have never encountered sitting in the IT rooms and eating in the mess and thinking that because I was eating with everybody else, I'd chat with them and I'd figure things out. Now, when you actually get down into where people are, what they're doing every day, I knew what it was like to be transported to a mine every day. So that type of experience is something that you want. And experience and experiment. I think we've agreed on that.
And you
Yeah,
can
totally. I
also
mean,
tie that
let's
into,
call it play. There is this old expression, which is something like child's play is child's work. That's the job of a child, is to play, to learn things. And somewhere along the way, we have this weird idea that we're all grown up now. We have to stop playing. No, everybody should be playing. And I think that every business in the world should be given an opportunity to play. Before like a couple of days ago, we were all talking about what the next steps in this were. And of course, the shiny new tools, the shiny new exceptional and interesting things right now, real-time audio, where you can have what sounds like a human voice talking to you on the other end. Jim, you did a story this morning on hashtag trending about the AI grandmother who plays with scammers, who talks to scammers on the phone. I just love that story. That one is awesome. And I'm one of the guys, by the way, who actually got somebody, a scammer, on the phone, and I held them there for about 10 minutes a few years ago, just talking to them, acting as dumb as I possibly could and wasting their time. So I love this AI grandmother thing.
I think everybody's phone should be answered. If you haven't listened to hashtag trending, listen to it on Friday morning because it was really great. But I think everybody's phone should be answered by this grandmother. And if the spammer, just keep them talking. And by the way, that would end telemarketing. Just saying.
Yeah, I have a Google Pixel phone, and the Google Pixels, by the way, I do not work for Google, and this is not an endorsement of a product that I'm being paid for. I love my Google phone to death. I love it because, first of all, it scans incoming calls to see if it's a scam call or likely spam. It just redirects it into a box somewhere and says, you can go and take a look at it, but I've checked this out and it's probably crap. You don't need to worry about it. Or there's a button that says screen call, where somebody calls and you don't know the number and it doesn't know for sure what it is. Push the screen call button and their AI answers the phone for you and starts to talk to them and says that the person you're calling is using an answering service from Google. Let me know why you're calling this person and I'll pass on the information to them. And of course, 99 times out of 100, they hang up. They actually are not interested in talking to the artificial intelligence. But like I said, the shiny new tools are stuff like that, but there are also things like video tools. You've seen me post a couple of videos that I made with Minimax and Runway ML. A while ago, I did an introduction for you where I used an AI avatar that introduced your show, Jim. So we've got things like that. We've got music producing things like, and audio for doing music. But those are all the sorts of things that are cheap because you can either do them freely or relatively inexpensively. And I think that businesses, whether they're small businesses or big businesses or whatever, it all sounds like play. It all sounds like fun, but it's also a learning experience. It doesn't feel like you're learning. It doesn't feel like I'm in a course and I have to write a test at the end of it or something like that. I'm making Godzilla burst out of a lake in Newfoundland or something like this. I think that's the kind of stuff that should be encouraged. It's new stuff. It's sexy. It's fun, but it might actually just open up some ideas in your business structure, in your corporate structure, whatever, that says, hey, we can actually use this sort of stuff. And whoever it is that I've got over in that department has gotten really good at making these monster videos. I wonder if we can incorporate their facility with working with this product into our marketing department, say.
and that goes back to what I talked about earlier about businesses trying to figure out how they can utilize AI. And you're exactly right, Marcel, that people have to play with it to understand the art of the possible, because then they can say, hey, I can take that and I can utilize it to do this within the business. Or Sally over education can use this to create a video kind of thing. People aren't going to know what they can do with it until they actually play with it.
And Marcel said play. And I think that's, let's just sound airy here, but we got to, the cultural change that's going to happen in business is going to be more like play. Doing a rote task is on its way out. If you're a plumber, forget it. Toilets are going to plug for the next 10 years. You're fine until you get a robot plumber, but you're fine. But if you're in an office and you have regular mundane tasks that are happening and they require some judgment or some expert skill, I wouldn't count on my future, especially as we get into things like agents. And I think that people may not understand exactly what's happening in the world of AI right now. They're the huge models, those huge things, the Claude, the Llamas, the Open AI, and a few open source models that are really worth watching. So you've got all of those things happening right now. You've got the need to figure out how to apply them. And then you've got some of the things that are coming in multimedia, the things that you're playing with a lot, Marcel, voice, you've got video. So you've got all of these components that are available for people. Then you've got a new thing that's coming in, and that's agents. Specific things that will do specific tasks, do them very well. And we always had this big thing about the big models and how they hallucinate. By the way, I have not seen a hallucination in 3 months, except maybe one night when I was thinking about the 60s. But no, I haven't seen anything tremendously inaccurate if you know how to prompt. For me, anyway, I'm not sure. Maybe it happens. But you get the big tools and all of that, and you get mystified by them, and there's good things to do with them. And now you've got these little things that come in and say, I can do this specifically very well. And I can do this specifically very well. And that, I think you're seeing it from OpenAI. They stumbled into it with thinking they were going to do it the same way that Apple did it with the GPTs. Everybody's going to write them. We're going to have a GPT store. We're going to sell 1 million of them and all that sort of stuff. Now, there's a bit of pullback, but there are expert agents, I think, that you'll see over and over again. I keep seeing this trend of these expert agents, and they're going to be very good at what they do. Because when you narrow this stuff, it's a lot easier to make something accurate and functional.
Yeah, these so-called GPTs, that's what terrible bloody name, actually. But we're back to this whole thing that in the AI industry, for whatever reason in AI, nobody seems to be able to come up with decent names for anything. OpenAI and Claude, it's like your 3.5 sonnet in brackets new, that sort of thing. It's just, who the hell comes up with this stuff?
Yeah.
Use your own models to come up with names. But I digress.
I need to know, though, but is a haiku better than a sonnet, or is a sonnet better than a haiku? That's what I can't keep it straight.
It depends on what you're doing. Sometimes a haiku is all you need. It's all you want, right? But in Google's court with their Gemini product, they have something called GEMS, which is their version of so-called GPTs. And as I understand it, GEMS are actually doing gangbusters. It's one of those avenues where these small agents are being created. These AI agents are being created, and the popularity of them is increasing dramatically. And I need to do a little bit more research on that. But somebody was telling me that it's, the gem businesses, and I'm not talking about working in the mines gems. I'm talking about with Google's version of these so-called GPT agents. And I think that the idea that everybody was going to be creating something and that we were going to somehow rent them out to people and make a little trickle of cash for the rest of our days is probably gone. And though I was saying that people had this weird idea, this was going to be one of the new business models. We're talking about these things that 6 months later, the business model just doesn't make any sense anymore. And one of them was, we're going to create these GPTs. We're going to create these little custom prompts, basically, to wrap around OpenAI or to wrap around Claude. And then these things we're going to rent them out. In other words, everybody that uses my particular GPT or my particular whatever is going to trickle a few cents into my bank account. And that was going to somehow be a big business model. But the fact is, we can create a highly customized custom agents that will work for the vast majority of people in specific environments. And I believe that's the whole point behind these gems. Like I said, I need to look at this. I heard the story on it last night. Yep. And I haven't had time to really take a look at it. But if you think about it, an accountant is very good at accounting. I don't know how they do it without falling asleep, but accountants are very good at accounting. And you don't need a specific accountant for every specific individual type of business. The basics of what this requirement is common across most, if not all, businesses. Maybe we could say there's a personal accountant versus a corporate accountant and so forth as specializations. But the fact is, they're interchangeable skills, and there's no reason why a reasonably well-developed and reasonably well-written agent couldn't apply to the vast majority of people that need this specific type of skill.
You can fix it so that there are different types of accounting, but fundamentally, when you get down to the accounting software, they're different, but how they're used. It's very easy to think about. I could have a mining accounting software. People do this already with software. You can have a very specific software and agent that can do the events you want. You can do this on the micro scale or the smaller scale. Salesforce just came out last week. They hired 1,000 people to sell what essentially is going to be an agent, right? They're agents so that people can do customer service and sales qualifications and things like this. And I'm betting dollars to donuts. You're going to see them outlined to say, we're going to have one for this industry, one for this industry, one for this industry, one for this industry. When you get them small like that, using RAG or remote augmented generation or whatever, you can encapsulate the knowledge. You can be very specific about training them. And you can train them incredibly cheaply, by the way, as well, and put them to work.
Yeah, unfortunately, we always think it's hard for us to stop thinking in human terms. Okay. And we're creating an intelligence that is well beyond anything that we are capable of doing. Let's go back to the accountant just for a split second here. I'm not trying to make accountants seem like superheroes or anything here. But if you think about it, they work with a variety of clients, unless of course they're hired specifically by a big corporate. But anyway, they work with a variety of clients, and in their brains and on their computers and in their filing systems, they section out all these different people that they work with. There are 20 or 10 or 20 or 30 or however many number of clients. They section all that stuff out, and we can accept that. We can wrap our brains around that. But an artificially intelligent agent is able to work on 100,000 systems, 10 million systems simultaneously, just like the AI grandmother that talks to the scammers. There isn't just one AI grandmother. There's 10,000 or 100,000 of these AI grandmothers all talking to the scammers on the phone at the same time. And we have to make this mental separation. We have to stop thinking in terms of there's this one thing out there. There isn't this one thing out there. There's 10,000 or 10 million copies of the one thing, all with their own compartmentalized knowledge for whoever it is that they're dealing with or however they're dealing with that person.
I think we hear a lot about things like these agents and so forth that are coming out of these tech companies that are building it, which they have to. I wonder too, though, how many actual businesses are starting to utilize that? It may be the top 1% or something that's utilizing it, but I think those types of things are going to be a little wild before they're going to trickle down to mid-sized business and so on. And I think that for the small to mid and even some of the larger businesses to wrap their heads around AI, I think they need to play with it. They need to figure out what areas they need to work on. Where can it be of benefit? Not just to implement it because we want to implement it. Where can we implement AI so that it will help to enhance our business?
Right. By on the small and medium size, it's not just Salesforce that's going to be putting this stuff out. Zoho's got its own AI. They'll be working the small and medium and even bottom end enterprise type of event as well. But we go back to that fundamental, and I think that when people say, what do you need to do now? I think you need to realize what's out there. I think you need to compartmentalize and say, look, there's a whole pile of things that can do language-oriented tasks, organization, research, and all those things better than anything else. There's a whole pile of other things that are really starting, and the first place they're bending is customer support, but they're starting to do interaction with people, voice interaction. You can get those sorts of tools. I think we're going to see something pretty soon from OpenAI in terms of voice control of your PC. So you're going to be able to get voice and video, and you need to look around it and say, those elements, what can I do in my business? I still go back to this idea of looking for the stuff that people hate doing. We've been assaulting accountants on the show, so I'll just go back to that. My accountant is really smart. When it comes to taxation law and all those sorts of things, nobody better. He's not a bookkeeper. The 90% of the stuff that I need that keeps the books and gets the stuff reported and all the foundation of that, he's not a bookkeeper. And the advice he gave to me was, it's really hard to find a good bookkeeper. And I think that's what we need to be doing in our businesses. First, start to play with these things. Start to play with the tools, find out what's there. And I think I'm going to start as a consultant. Marcel was going to talk to you about this, was to start offering a workshop to just walk people through, to say, here's the stuff you can do. And I think that's one of the things that I want to do, is just walk people through and say, here's the stuff you can do. Start to play. And then figure out the things that you can do now that work. And I think that's the best advice anybody can give, because artificial general intelligence, who cares in a business sense? Somebody was talking about the Fermi paradox in leadership. You guys know the Fermi paradox, like, why isn't there intelligence, life in space? Why haven't we found it yet? This guy's really good. He's in a universe teaching, and he's talking to people who are doing leadership. He says, have you heard of the Fermi paradox in leadership? It must be out there somewhere. We just can't find it. And I think that's an opportunity for businesses to actually take some leadership
No, I'd agree
A
with
few
that.
years ago, I gave a talk in Michigan, oddly enough, at a security conference. One of the things I brought up at some point, so there's an audience of about 500 or 600 people that I'm talking in front of at the time. This was at the University of Michigan. It was done with Department of Homeland Security for IT security type stuff. Anyway, I digress. So this is like ChatGPT is still way on the horizon here. And I was talking about the coming of artificial intelligence systems and agents and so on. I actually brought up the idea of the trolley problem. And of course, we have, this is a classic one here. You ask about, everybody knows what the trolley problem is. And then I look out into the audience and there are a lot of people who look really confused. I said, hands up if you don't know what the trolley problem is. And the vast majority of hands went up. About 80% of this audience of 500, 600 people's hands went up. I don't know what the trolley problem is. We have this weird blind spot when we work in this industry, specifically in IT, like people like us work in IT and we know our stuff really well. We have this weird blind spot that we don't know what people don't know. We just assume that because we know it, everybody else knows that stuff. There's a term for that weird sort of blind spot of just assuming that everybody knows your particular business. And maybe that's one of those places where businesses need to think about this is, what do we know that we just assume that everybody else knows? How can we not just train ourselves, but train the people that we work with, or explain what it is we do to the people that we work with? So just trying to make a case for using a specific thing doesn't mean that the people understand why you're making a case for that specific thing. And I actually don't know how we get there. I don't know how we all start to understand what we're doing other than maybe having something intelligent that can bridge the gap between what it is that you do on this side, what it is that I expect from you as a customer, and something explains to the two of us so that we're all on the same page in terms of what it is we do.
I think,
What you need and what you think the other person needs are sometimes completely different. And trying to figure that out is probably the hardest thing.
but I think tied in with what Jim was talking about with the workshops and what you're talking about, Marcel, about you don't know what you don't know, is that these workshops are a great idea because it gives them the art of the possible, gives them some ideas of things that they could potentially be looking at. And that will help to tweak their brain that says, hey, in our business, we could actually use that to do this, or we should try doing this. Coupled with those workshops, and as you said earlier, Marcel, about playing with the tools, that gives people a better idea of what they might be able to do with it.
Let's pretend that you wanted to set up a marketing campaign for some new service that you're offering. And you could have a hairdressing salon, for instance, or something. The time that it takes you to go out and find the market.
Jim's adjusting his hair. Going, yes, of course, whenever you think of a business that I should be in, a hair salon is the first that comes.
But you would need to go out and find a said marketing person, find the advertising person, which involves an amazing amount of time. So yes, I have to go and ask people. I have to get these stories. It's a $1,000 laptop that you're going to spend the next 30 days trying to figure out. Whereas, what exists out there that I can incorporate, that I can experiment with. So we're back to the playing again. And all of a sudden I've got a reasonably credible or reasonably not bad advertising campaign, at least until I figure out where I'm going with this stuff. Here's my new product and here's how I'm presenting it to the world. I saw an interesting demonstration a while ago of targeted emails. Like we all love these things, right? These targeted emails. Hi, first name, last name, but they didn't bother filling in the information. I've gotten some lately, which I thought were really clever. I've gotten a couple, and there's a company out there, at least one of those. I'm sure there's lots of them, but there's a company out there, I think called Be Human or something like that, where you would record. You've seen it, where you record your message, whatever it is. So, like the three of us sitting here talking. So you talk, you explain what your message is, what it is that you're doing. And they use a little bit of AI magic or whatever to insert the person's name so that it becomes a person, so that every single, even though it's a mass mailing, every single person gets a personalized video message and that makes it look like they're talking to the person. And they're not talking to an avatar. They're actually talking to the person from the company, except that the video has been manipulated and the audio has been manipulated so that your name appears in there so that it does seem like it's personalized. And I thought stuff like that was amazingly clever. And those are applications that maybe you don't necessarily think of off the top of your head, especially if you have a mailing list of existing customers that you want to reach out to. these are clever little tools that you can take advantage of. And the bar is so low. It's so cheap to get into some of these things. I wouldn't want to be the company that provides these services because I don't know how long this is going to go on. But to take advantage of them, to get the value from them, to reach out to your customer base is minimal.
I think that then the cost is not going to go up. There's going to be a day of reckoning. People are going to try and want to reclaim some of this money they've invested in AI.
Claude's token cost went up on one of their models, but I digress.
But the cost of tokens, I know that they've gone up over a little bit recently, but overall, the cost of tokens has gone way down. And there will be a day of reckoning in competition as well. I was watching this Chinese firm that has taken over, and amazing thing, really, the U.S. choked off China for technology. And so what did they do? They brought over some Americans who came over and helped them through it. And so now there's one AI company there that's doing wonderful stuff that can train an AI model for $3 million, not $100 million. Why? Because they had to really work at it. And this is where I think the application of the technology, the next rollout is going to be whether the big companies will charge whatever they can charge and they'll take whatever they can get. But there's going to be another industry. It's like, remember you used to buy a Sony TV and then other people would wait 8 months and they'd buy a JVC for half the price with the same picture quality practically. We'll be subject to some of that, I'm saying.
Hey, my Sony TV has been there for 15 years and it still works. I just want to say.
Oh no, they were absolutely top of the line, beautiful devices that were replicated 18 months later for the majority of people who were clever enough to wait, Marcel.
Ouch.
No, it's like me. I was loving to get a new car. You get the new car smell and all that sort of stuff. And then my friends buy the same car in 2 years, have it. Yeah, somebody sprays that stuff in there and they feel just as good. But I took the depreciation. That's why I'm not rich. So closing this off. So we've come up with hopefully we've taken people through a bit of a wandering conversation, but I think we've established some things, and that is there is a period of confusion. There's a lot happening out there. You're not going to understand it unless you start playing with it. And we started this out with, how do we explain this to people? I could talk about large language models. We can talk about video. We can talk about audio. But the reality is, unless you start playing with it, you can't be a sports commentator. You've actually got to get on the field and start playing with it. That's my sports analogy, and I'm sticking with it.
Go play football, don't be an armchair quarterback.
There are things that a business can do that an individual can't do in the same way. If you have any number of employees or any number of customers, you have some kind of a budget for some kind of research and development, whatever it is you do, you're thinking about what happens next? What do we provide? How do we improve our services and so forth? And that's what research and development is about. It's not about necessarily trying to come up with a new cure for baldness, but it's just like we need to figure out how to make what we do better or figure out what the next thing that we're going to provide is going to be. And that's what research and development is. Invest in a robot. Buy one of these cheap Chinese robots that are available for $15,000 at the moment. Bring it into your company and play with that. Find out, have it walking around. It's got cameras, it's got AI stuff in it. Have it walk around your warehouse and start to get a feel for what it's like to incorporate these sorts of things into what it is you do. You can go like way out and skate the bleeding edge of what's possible without necessarily investing an absolute fortune. How much does it cost to have one additional person walk the floor and look for things? One of the things that I'm really excited about right now, I've invested, some people have invested in the Amazon ecosystem in the houses. We've invested in the Google ecosystem here in the house. I've got the cameras, the smart Nest cameras and so forth. I was reading that there's going to be a thing there where you can say, take a look at the videos for the last couple of days. What was it that ran across the front porch last night? And the AI is going to be smart enough to answer those questions for you. It's, well, there was a squirrel that ran across your front porch last night at 2 a.m. Other than that, there hasn't been anything. Like, this is amazing.
And honey, why is my brother here all the time? I do everything and I ask myself, first of all, now, can I do it with AI? Everything. I do it first with AI. And sometimes that takes a little bit of an investment. It takes me longer to do it the first time. And then after that, it's really simple. I could not do what I do right now. I take this podcast we're doing from production to editing, and it'll be ready later this morning. How? Magic of AI. Do I know anything about editing? When I started this out, I was an executive who ran a production company. I've seen the inside of studios. I've had great chats with my people who did video and all of those sorts of things. Mostly they tried to keep me out of that stuff. And I know the inside of a recording studio because I'm a musician, but video and all that, wow. Now I'm a video editor and producing at a level that I would have taken days and days to do.
But the other thing too is, even let's just go basic, utilizing ChatGPT for something very simple, or whether it's ChatGPT or Copilot or Notebook LM or whatever, it's all about the prompt. It's all about what you put or how you build your prompt. And the more you use it, the better you get at building those prompts. And
I'm going to give you a job, John. I want you in the next week to, before you prompt something, ask the model how you would prompt to do this thing. Don't craft the prompt. Ask the AI to craft the prompt for you.
And Claude has a prompt crafter coming out. It was announced yesterday, and it will improve your prompts. But you're on the right track, John, and that is the job that people are going to have. We talked about this. Unless you're a plumber, and if you're a plumber, send me your number because I got But unless you're doing something like that, your job is going to be managing AI. It's that simple. Your job is going to be managing AI in some context, whether you're in a restaurant and they exist already. And you're talking about robots. Marcel, a friend of mine who runs a very average sort of bar restaurant, is engaged in buying a robot because he can't find people. So we're going to start to see these things appearing all over the place over the next 18 months to 2 years. And that's a really short time in business.
Yeah, for sure.
So why don't we give John the last word? Just because he's always trying to get in there and talk between the two of us in there. John, what are you planning on?
I think from my standpoint, I think there's an awful lot of things that you can do with AI in business. And I think that people need to use it and learn how to better utilize it and what the art of the possible. From my standpoint, I want to make sure that we can utilize it, but I also need to make sure that we protect the data. And so it's a bit of a balancing act for me, but I want us to get to a point where we can actually start to play with it, to figure out what some of the things are that it can be used for to help improve things within the business. We're a customer service company. And so how can we better serve our customers through the use of AI to make it 24/7, all kinds of things like that I think are capable with AI, but we have to do it the right way.
And that's actually a really good point. And the one place that I would advise people to get outside help if they're getting started, and the security of these models is this side of pathetic and moving rapidly towards terrible. So before you just unleash this in your company, make sure that you've got a good sandbox, or you've got somebody who actually knows how to release these tools to people and get them so that they're not going to do anything foolish and explode on you. I did a thing with the guy from Mozilla on their bug bounty program.
Yep.
And I thought I knew how pathetic AI security was until he started to walk me through it. And he's a hacker, system admin, hacker guy. And he took me through how easy it was to get in. And I wouldn't even broadcast most of that. The idea about security is important, but that doesn't stop you. You just have to know what you're doing and how to protect your company and keep people so they are, as Marcel said, playing, but playing responsibly. It's like the old thing of the BB gun, right? Don't give your kid a BB gun without giving them some training.
Yeah, I think you have to bake security into the deployment of AI or the utilization of AI. It can't be an afterthought.
Okay. So I'm going to make a commitment. Probably won't do it. I don't know if we'll do it as one of the regular episodes we run, but I think I'm going to get us together next week and we're going to walk through this workshop idea from start to finish. What should you do? And we'll give away all the secrets. People want to do it themselves, they can do it themselves. But we'll show you how to do it. And then we'll send you a BB gun.
You'll shoot your eye. You'll shoot your
I'll find it until somebody puts out an eye. Get that grandmother off from answering the phone. You know? Guys, this has been fabulous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Marcel Gagné, John Pinard,
thank you.
and me. And that's our show for today. If you're interested in the workshop or if you have questions or comments, you can reach me at editorial@technewsday.ca, or you can find me where a lot of people do, on LinkedIn. I'm your host, Jim Love. Have a great weekend.